We have started celebrating the 150th anniversary of the unification of Italy last year in 2011, and we will continue.
This is about a book that I wrote called Murder and Media in the New Rome. It tells a true story. This is a painting from 1882 called In Corte d'Assise, which it basically means in the criminal court. This is a reproduction of the same painting that was published in a popular illustrated weekly that was distributed nationally. So this is a picture of a trial of this woman who was accused of having killed her husband with the help of her lover. Captain Giovanni Fadda was a war hero. He was a hero of the Italian Risorgimento. So when we're talking about the unification wars, we're talking, this is a man who became a hero at the crucial battle of the Italian Risorgimento, when Italy basically drove the Italian forces, this was before the nation was entirely unified, drove Austria out of the region of Lombardy and basically out of their, for the most part, out of their possessions. He was wounded in this battle. 11 years later, he married a young girl from southern Italy. She was accused of, after they'd been married for 7 years, taking a lover who was a circus acrobat. And that the circus acrobat and she had plotted together to kill her husband in order to get him out of the way. Rome only became part of the nation of Italy, it became the capital of Italy, of the unified nation, in 1870. Before that, there was not a defense and a prosecution, and there was not a jury. So these were new institutions that were established and were extremely strong markers of the fact that Italy had become an independent nation, a democratic nation. And the most sensational thing about this trial was the fact that women, hordes of women, crowded into this trial and managed to get tickets and reacted very loudly to testimony and with a great sense of participation. And it exploded into really a prototype version of the kind of media circus trial phenomenon that we're so familiar with today, both in the United States and in Italy. And it came along exactly at a moment when newspapers were beginning to discover a new audience. Because before that, newspapers in the nation of Italy had addressed a very restricted audience. The fact that women took such an interest in this trial was extremely disturbing to the guardians of the morality and the rectitude of this new Italian state. Now notice the rhetoric of the newspaper reports. This is as it's represented in the trial. Imagine the captain suddenly attacked, fallen onto his chair as he seeks to defend himself with desperate convulsive movements. Imagine that valiant man as he wrestles his fierce assassin even to his last breath as he falls to the floor in a pool of blood. This is language not taken from novels, no, taken from a certain kind of novelistic imagination. The culprit was arrested on the spot, but he denied any connection whatsoever to the trial, to the murder. He claimed that he had been falsely and unfairly caught. Now, what was the story with this young wife? And how was she represented by newspapers in the trial? Okay, here too, this is how, throughout the trial, as the painting represented, she wept continuously. And she denied having anything to do with the acrobat, having anything to do with the murder, and she denied even knowing that her husband had any kind of disability. She began to attract a great deal of public sympathy for her conduct in the trial. One of the things that the media really focused on with regard to Raffaella Saraceni was her appearance. And whether or not her appearance, her physical appearance, suits the symbolic themes that were imposed upon her as a heroine of the trial. She's not a glamorous kind of figure, such as to be the protagonist of a great trial drama. The captain, on the other hand, in all the trial coverage, was sort of apotheosized into an image of virtue, of soldierly and patriotic virtue. This trial, which was really a very kind of a very sensational, melodramatic, and private event, was mapped out onto the national imaginary as a issue of national politics, conflicts between men and women, the North and South. One of the high points of the trial was that the national poet of national independence, of the Risorgimento, and of the new Italian state was Giosuè Carducci. He was the bard of the nation at the time. He wrote an epode condemning the women who attended the trial as doing the same thing to the nation of Italy as Raffaella Saraceni was accused of doing to her husband. So at the end of the trial, the acrobat and the wife were found guilty. He was sentenced to death, and after 2 weeks the king commuted that to life imprisonment, which was common practice in that era. And the wife was sentenced to life imprisonment originally, and then after about 8 years her defense attorney became the equivalent of the Attorney General of the nation. And shortly after he retired, she was pardoned. She wasn't pardoned, but her sentence was terminated and she was sent back home.
What struck me in reading Tom's book was part of the enormous attention this case attracted was that it tapped into a whole set of fears and anxieties. Fears and anxieties of whom? Not a mass public. Because I would argue in the 1870s, there is no such thing as a mass public in Italy. It does tap into the anxieties and fears of Italian nationalists, but Italian nationalists represent a very small portion of the people actually living on the peninsula in the 1870s. And it's precisely because they're a very small minority that they feel extremely anxious, fearful about the Italian nation and its future, and also about Italian national character. Because the Risorgimento itself, as its name suggests, implies a resurgence, a rebirth. And the idea was we're not just creating a new Italy, we're creating new Italians. If you break this case down into polarities, you've got the North and the South. The murderer is Southern. Now technically, Captain Fada is not, he's from Sardinia, but let's qualify him as a member of the North, he's a member of the Army. There's also the element of class here, because the murderer is the functional equivalent of what we call in the United States a carny. So it's the fear of the lower classes. Then it gets also into these issues of masculinity, virility, and national identity. In the Italian context, they become very intertwined. So I think there's anxiety there about Italian men being worthy of the nation, being sufficiently virile. These are issues that are going to come up again and again. That Rome was governed by the Vatican until 1870. This is 1878. And the Italian liberal nationalists, secular nationalists, are engaged simultaneously in a war, not a literal war, but an ideological war with the Catholic Church in the late 19th century, which is offering a sort of counter-vision and arguing that this new secular Italy is decadent. It's a sign of decline, not a sign of resurgence. And a case like this plays perfectly into the hands of the Catholic Church.
I'm wondering how you would characterize the New Rome, since that's part of the title, correct?
Right. It's the new Rome because it was the new secular Rome under a democratic government. I mean, it was under it was as the capital of the secular democratic state of Italy, as opposed to the Rome of the previous 1400 years, which was the capital of Christendom. Okay, and then before that, the first Rome was the republican and imperial Rome of ancient history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.